Okay, so how's it going, guys? This is Rio Murata, photographer based in Tokyo. So CP Plus actually kicked off last week, and you guys probably seen my, or never seen my 2023 video on CP Plus. CP Plus is basically a camera and photography convention that happens every year in the month of February. This year it started from February 22 to the 25th, if I'm right. And it's basically a convention more towards like 100% digital. And because you guys probably have guessed, this channel is unfortunately a film related channel, I thought it would not make that much of a sense. However, there were a couple of areas that I wanted to like mention of this convention, which is related to film. So I thought it would be nice to just do a light coverage of this, but I know this video is going to be super long. At the same time, I actually caught a cold, and when I get sick, I rarely get sick at all, but when I get sick, I'm like down. My motivation hits bikini bottom, as in SpongeBob SquarePants. And honestly, I wasn't motivated at all because my voice, my nose, and I have a little bit of cough, and at the same time, I get bombarded by a lot of people during these types of conventions. I was not ready to go, unfortunately, but I had to like at least give you guys that content for, I guess, entertainment purposes. So yeah. And CP Plus, like I said, happens in the month of February, and the exact same location every year. It happens in that Pacifico, Yokohama, which is like a 20-30 minute train ride away from Shibuya station. And honestly, where to cover first, but this year, or last year actually, I started shooting with Voigtlander's, aka Cosina made optics lenses. I made a video on it, the 35mm f1.2 Nocton from Voigtlander / Cosina. And I thought it would be nice to just visit the sort of like the Cosina booth, because they are always there every year. I never did a coverage last year, but this year I started shooting with it more, and I thought it would be nice to sort of like see for my eyes what they had in store for me. And if you're a Fujifilm user, Voigtlander, aka Cosina, has been making optics, new optics actually, every year. And it started out with a Nocton 35mm and also a 23mm f1.2. They kind of extended to the 27mm f2 Ultron, which I'm eyeing on right now. And this year, actually, they were actually showcasing the Color Scopar 18mm f2.8mm lens. And I'm not an optics guy, so I can't say what the intricate difference is in between Color Scopar, Ultron, and Nocton's for night, actually, indoor use. But the 18mm f2.8 is similar to the Ultron 27mm. It is a small, lightweight pancake lens, which actually caught my attention because I never owned a pancake type of lens. This was really attractive in my eyes, and also at the same time I did not want to look at my bank account because I know money's gonna disappear. But I thought it would be nice to sort of mention that lens on my channel, because there are a fair quite amount of people who shoot with the Fujifilm system who want to get that what we call the film like look, and Voigtlander is actually one of those options that are available. Okay, so because of my sickness, I wasn't able to grab that much of a footage, but after visiting Cosina, I actually found out that Lomography joined the crowd, and they actually had a booth set up, a small, relatively like small like stage actually, and they were showcasing their film stocks, their cameras, and the 4x5 actually, and it was actually great to see them there. Although this convention, like I said, is supposed to be meant for digital, I mean, film is warmly welcomed, and I was like really surprised to see familiar faces. And it's like great seeing Lomography back in the game, appealing so much, especially in the film community, for providing really affordable film stocks once again. And it was actually a pleasure to see them live and active, and yeah, it was actually great seeing them being displayed at CP Plus. Okay, so after Lomography's booth, I was basically walking around, and I found this sort of like unique sort of like booth, similar in size with Lomography's like booth, that Super 8 Lab was actually also being presented there. And this was something new which I never knew about. I heard it somewhere, but I wasn't sure what they did specifically. But if you because like 99% of you guys like live outside, I have to like explain it to you guys. Super 8 Lab is sort of like a service located in downtown Tokyo, which they offer a really unique service. I never shoot with Super 8, which is sort of like a video camera back in the days. You guys probably seen those like reels of a Super 8 film, probably at theaters, IMAX maybe. But what they do in Tokyo is that they give you guys sort of like an all-in-one solution of the problems that have when shooting with Super 8 is obviously the processing and the scanning and the data and stuff like that. They basically bundle all those together. So Super 8 Lab in Tokyo, they do sort of like they give you a fresh roll of Super 8, just one roll, and also they do the scanning process and they do the processing, the ECN2 if I'm right, all in one solution. And you basically they sort of like send your film that you shot to their lab and they basically do everything for you, and they basically scan it in high res 4K resolution if I'm right, sticking the data right here for a relatively affordable price actually, which caught my attention because I never shot with Super 8, and this service is like probably unique in Tokyo. That would be like notable to like mention on my channel. And at the same time, I think you can decide like which kind of film stocks that you want to shoot with, like 50D, 200T, or what else do they have? They have like 3 options, but you can basically choose one of them, and they basically do the processing for you in my mind. And also they do rental services of the equipments of the Super 8 cameras, and it's actually nowadays really hard to find a Super 8 camera. It's hard to tell if it's fully operational and stuff like that, and there's the problems that you purchase it thinking that it works, but it doesn't. But Super 8 Lab, they have those operational like equipment ready to be rented out for you guys, so I thought it would be nice to sort of like test it if I have the time. But yeah. Okay, so after going to Super 8 Lab, I actually went to the Fujifilm booth, and unfortunately my motivation wasn't that like spectacular because I'm still sick, and my voice and stuff is not that at its peak. But I did not look at the X100, what was it, 6, which a lot of people were looking forward to, because I'm not a sort of like an avid street photographer, unfortunately, and this is like a film channel. I'll just let that slip away from me because I live in Tokyo. I can basically test it once it gets fully released. So other than that I realized after going around the Fujifilm booth, I think Volhands, I forgot how you pronounce his name, but one of his works was actually being presented in the backside of the gallery section, and this was really significant because he shot with the X100 6 actually, sort of like a sample shot of what it can do, and because it has like 40 megapixels, you can actually enlarge the image to quite a big size without losing any details. So that was actually something unique and neat in my opinion. But after going to Fujifilm's sort of like booth and just wandering around, being bombarded by crowds and losing my motivation, I basically went to Fresco Giclee. I think I lightly covered them last year, but I thought it would be nice to sort of like give you guys more depth in their sort of like booth, because I think it's something significant related to my channel. And a lot of like the top artists, photographers, when they sort of like, or maybe people who like to sell their like artwork, they end up obviously sort of like printing their sort of like work onto sort of like an inkjet type of paper. And Fresco Giclee is, how should I say, the king of the hills in terms of museum photo paper in my mind. And I know that I'm gonna enrage so many people because there are people out there who like to like print on Ilford, hand mule, I mean for inkjets and stuff like that. But in Japan specifically, Fresco Giclee is like a king of the hills because in terms of the quality that you get, and it's hard to explain across the screen. However, they were actually displaying a lot of like photo artwork there, and you can basically tell the significant difference if you print it onto this type of paper versus a typical like inkjet type of paper. But my screen just turned off unfortunately, and I had to turn it on. But Where to begin? Fresco Giclee is basically a type of paper made out of plaster, and most Renaissance like artworks back in the days have been drawn on top of plaster type of material. And what's significant about this material of plaster is that when you look through a microscope, you can see that plaster, the material itself, has really uneven surfaces, meaning that when you sort of like print something via the inkjet printer using a pigment type of printer, what happens is that these uneven surfaces creates like a depth, and in film terminologies it would be like grain, the structure. Because there's a grain structure, you get this 3D look, there's a depth to the image. But when you shoot with digital, most of the time what happens is that the image, the pixel is like so clean, and also the what you call the rendition from the shadow to the highlights is so clean that it's hard to portray that depth when you start like printing if you print on a flat surface type of paper. However, if you print it on a sort of like a Fresco Giclee type of paper, because the plaster has uneven surface, it creates that sort of like a 3D look. Thus, you get a relatively deep type of image in terms of the contrast, and also the I guess the foreground and background, etc., etc. It's hard to explain, but that's actually the strengths of like printing onto Fresco Giclee. Yeah, so there is this sort of like chemistry behind how this inkjet pigment ink basically enters the surface of the plaster paper itself, and because it fuses with carbon dioxide, I'll stick in a chemistry thing. I failed chemistry, so it's hard for me to explain, however, but because there's this sort of like chemistry going on, it actually takes quite a long time for Fresco Giclee to be sort of like fully dry before it can be used in a museum setting. And from what I hear, it takes like 3 hours to maybe 6 hours, maybe half a day for it to be fully like dried and fully be able to be handled by hand and stuff like that. And another like unique feature about Fresco Giclee paper is that if you ever touched Fresco Giclee paper, unlike any other inkjet paper, it feels really wet, in my opinion. Like really there's like a moisture to the paper, and ever since I touched it, I was like really shocked, because I was like, it feels as if it's like living, and it's hard to explain across screen. But if you have the opportunity, I highly suggest touching a Fresco Giclee paper. You will be amazed, because it's just a piece of paper with an artwork being printed on. However, it feels like as if it's like really living thing. Like typical like papers like these types of papers, it's like fully dry, so you know what it feels like touching a glossy paper. It's like really, it doesn't feel wet at all. But Fresco Giclee is sort of like a league of its own, and it's like hard to explain. But if you have the opportunity, it is great to see. And they had basically a lot of artworks being sort of like, you can basically touch it and you can basically like see for yourself the differences. And this year around, interesting enough, they were displaying or sort of like selling two types of Fresco Giclee paper. And I originally thought Fresco Giclee there was only one type of paper, but this year they were actually selling, I guess the company that manages the Fresco Giclee brand, actually they started selling two types of variations, the type S and type R. And if you said sensitivity for the S and type R as in Civic type R for Honda fanboys, I'm sorry to say that is, you're completely wrong. But S as in smooth and R as in rough, and this is basically the I guess the pixel density of the, not the pixel density, but the density of the plaster itself. The rough is actually really rough, meaning that it is meant for like artworks that are sort of like for landscapes and architectural that have like a significant depth into the image. So while the smooth, on the other hand, the what we call the texture grain itself of the plaster is much more smoother, which means that it's much more better for the opposites of the rough, meaning that it's more towards the high key type of stuff, like a bright image, or more like for portraits, for like I guess smoother skin tones and stuff like that. So that was actually something interesting to like see for this year in particular from the Fresco Giclee's booth. What was interesting was the price. It was like A4 sheets of paper of 10, was 6,600 yen, which is roughly $50 for 10 sheets of paper. Just A4 size, A3 size, it's like double the price. So obviously it's a museum grade paper, and like I said, it is sort of like a living organism, meaning that once you purchase that paper, you have to like print it ASAP, similar as in film stocks, because there is a lifespan to these types of papers. So that's like another area to mention. So if you're ever wanting to like print a lot of your works all at once, I think it would be wise to just purchase in bulk and just print as much as you can while you're at it and save a lot of cost in the long run. So yeah, that's my coverage of Fresco Giclee's booth. So yeah, like I said, this is sort of like meant towards the film community, so I did not want to cover like digital related stuff, unfortunately, and because I do it as sort of like a full-time e-commerce photographer, I basically had to gather information on that side. So I thought it would be nice to just mention the ones related to film photography. And like I said, I guess I wanted to see the X106 from Fujifilm that was being displayed. However, I had to wait like about an hour or so to sort of like get it in my hand and just test it out. But I did not have that motivation to sort of like see that camera, and because I live in Tokyo, Japan, I can basically rent it if I wanted to. So yeah, that's basically my coverage of CP Plus of 2024. And interesting enough, the X106, they were doing this promo video by Ben Allen, if I'm right, it's one of those videos that I highly suggest you guys to watch, because not for pleasure, not as if the company wants you to sell that like camera, but it's more like the arts of and the crafts of photography. And it's been a while since I've seen a promo video that was sort of like directed in a way where the company's not wanting you to sell that camera to you, but wants to see the users to craft their own sort of like artwork from using their cameras. So yeah, I'll stick in a link. It's like really intuitive and also great and amusing to watch at the same time, and also educational because it showcases Ben Allen's sort of like philosophy for his photography and how it shaped his photography career. And I think he came around in 1980s, and it was also showcasing his works and also how he sort of like reflected the 1980s with today and the reasons why photography exists. So it's like really educational, and I found it like really educational in my mind. So yeah, please check that out. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, found it informative. If you have any questions, I'm happy to reply. And yeah, we will see you next time. Peace out.